Dr. Murefu, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, soon to be Dr. Chikumbu.
Wonderful. I'm very much happy to have you today. You are very much welcome. How is work and your family? By the way, I should be saying happy birthday to you.
Thank you. I've turned 63 today, and I'm excited, but of course, under a restrictive environment. But you know, we are not really conditioned what is happening externally. What's happening internally is much more important.
Oh yeah, sure thing. Wonderful. That's some very good news that you have turned 63. You know, I'm just 24 and I have a lot to learn from people like you.
Wow. Still
But,
a baby.
Yeah, I'm probably generations before you, before and after you.
Well,
yeah.
Contemporaries for a while.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, as a young man, I don't think I don't have much to say to you at 63. I think the only thing that I can advise you at 63 is that die very young, as late as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'm very much happy to have you for this particular episode to examine the topic Understanding Church Governance, which is a comparative analysis of democracy and theocracy as systems. I'm happy to have you considering the experiences that you have had as an ordained pastor and as an academic in the Apostolic Faith Mission. I do have a couple of questions for you today, but before we start, as your 63 birthday celebration, can you just give us a brief background of your academic and pastoral journey, including the research interests that you have engaged and some of the books that you have authored?
Well, I was born and raised in a Christian family. My father went to Bible school in Kasupe in Zambia. He was in the same class with the late Reverend Kupara, and he did so much. But we didn't realize the greatness of our father until after his death in 1974. And that's when my older brother, decided to go to Bible school in 1975. And then I followed suit in 1976, graduating from then Rhodesian African Bible College, now Living Waters Theological Seminary in 1978. And went briefly for a crash course in South Africa with the University of Pretoria. And then thereafter, I went to United States and was there in the state of Rhode Island, doing some graduate and postgraduate studies. And consequently, the Lord helped me to achieve not only a master's degree, but also a PhD. And this was perhaps the result of a covenant I had with God, because when I felt God was calling me into ministry, I said, Lord, if you are really serious about me getting into ministry, allow me to get education. If I can get a minimum of 3 degrees and more, then I know it's you. The rest is history. God has allowed me to attain 2 bachelor's degrees, one in education and the other one in theology, then a master's in philosophy and master's in theology, and then a PhD in theology. So that's the sum total of my education. And I've done a lot of theological journals, including little books like Biblical Foundation for Believers, which I did mainly for the church here in Zimbabwe, as well as in the making Azusa to Harare, which is the historical narrative of the AFM, and also looking at Biblical Africa, whereby we see the involvement of Africa or Africans within the Bible. Of course, the word Africa does not appear in the Bible. Africa is a Latino Franco word that was brought in, which simply means dark-skinned, meaning that Africa is the only continent named after the pigmentation of its inhabitants. But the proper name for Africa in the Bible is Ethiopia and Egypt. At one time, those were ruled under one monarch. So whenever you hear Egypt, Ethiopia, and so forth, is speaking of Africa. And that's, I have a big interest in that. And I'm doing a lot of research, working and seeing from the very beginning in the Garden of Eden, and also looking at the possibilities that, very strong possibilities that the Garden of Eden was on this continent of Africa, overlapping to the Middle East, which then was Northeast Africa. Because what you call Middle East today was part of the continent until 1869, the digging of the Suez Canal, which separated the rest of the continent from the Middle East. But however, originally, it was one big land.
Oh, okay, I see. What a profound background career in the pastoral and in the academic realm. Well, we want to discuss about church governance today. We want to examine the idea of democracy and theocracy. And first of all, I would like to have this discussion with you in light of the findings that were concluded by the World Council of Churches after a research was done to investigate the reason why people in the sub-Saharan continent are leaving one church to join another. And it seems that over 65% of the people that were interviewed by the researchers who engaged this research, they responded that they were leaving their churches not because of any other reason, but primarily because they were upset by the way in which their church was governed. And in light of this, of these conclusions, I would like to inquire knowledge about this. The first question that I have for you is that what is this thing that we call church governance, and why is it important?
Well, church governance is mainly the way the church is run, with the controls and conditions, terms and conditions, of course, the hierarchical order, who is who, the reporting system, and the financial accounting. And all these put together will bring about the sum total of church governance. It's beyond just pulpit proclamation, but it is looking at how you manage, the way business is managed. There are a lot of parallels and principles that we need to also factor into church governance. And one of the things that we have seen is that a church might have a constitution and a proper manner of governance written out and spelled out well. But the leadership is not following the script. So the people today are better educated than before, or perhaps asking more questions than ever before, because during the yesteryear, people just looked at the spiritual leadership. Whatever the spiritual leader said, that's what they followed. But today they're looking at something that is proper. We have got our members who have done up to PhD degrees in governance, in financial management, and in other areas that are related. And when they don't see these principles being practiced within the church, they become disgruntled. And the other thing is that power also. People feel that it is my time to get this particular level of power, while others who have been in power do not follow constitutional defines of how long they could stay in that power and the exercise of power and many other related things. So therefore, this in particular will bring us to an issue that there has to be a proper governance, how things are controlled, how things are managed, and the vision and the way we achieve what we have to achieve. It must be done in a biblical manner, in a way that honors God, and also in a way that is very transparent. So in a nutshell, this sums up what we call church governance.
Oh, wonderful, which is very much important and necessary. In the modern day, it is always essential to move with the times and to move with institutional administrative systems that can get progress to be achieved.
True.
I've noticed that when reviewing the landscape of these modern systems of church governance, there are particularly three main systems that emerge That is to say, the episcopal structure, the Presbyterian structure, and the congregational structure.
Yes.
What are these systems and how do they work?
Well, briefly defined, the episcopal structure, from the word episcopos, they had the presbytery. It is looking at the head of the denomination, the church, giving instructions that are cascaded down to the last in the order, in the pecking order, the least one, and so forth. So the episcopal is what we find mainly within the Catholic Church. Whatever the Pope says is not disputed, is not a subject for debate or discussion. It is just to be followed. And this is mainly the way the episcopal churches do work. And of course, you see a little bit of marination of that episcopal system in other denominations that are not properly episcopal. Mm-hmm. Then the congregational is exactly the opposite of the episcopal. More power is in the congregation, vested in the congregation, and they make decisions, and they can hire and fire, and they have power within themselves. That's the congregational. So there is power vested within the congregation. While the Presbyterian system is a middle of the road between the episcopal as well as the congregational. This perhaps is one of the best ways, in my own view, of church governance, because if we initially look at the book of Acts in chapter 6, when there was not much church governance, mm-hmm. and there was some complaints coming from the way food was distributed, the Hebrews and the Christian widows were not getting equal shares. And Apostle Peter came up with some form of governance, which I would call Presbyterian system. And he said to them, it is not good for us to leave the preaching of the word and serve tables. Mm-hmm. So you, the people, choose from among yourself, mm-hmm. 7 people who are full of the Holy Spirit, who are full of faith, who are reputable, people that you approve. Mm-hmm. So they are given the mandate to choose from among themselves the people they want to do the job. And when they chose those 7, which included Stephen, mm-hmm. they presented them to the apostles, and the apostles laid their hands in approval, and the 7 began to do their work. So here, what are we having? We're having the top leadership involved, and we have the congregation also being involved, and everybody is happy. And the result of proper church governance is that the gospel is preached and the kingdom of God is expanded. When there is no proper church governance, there is a still growth of the church. The church is at a standstill, it becomes sterile, and there's no progress. And as a result, people are looking for freedom somewhere, and they end up starting their own ministries, their own churches, their own little denominations, which grow big in the process of time with a particular form of governance, which is peculiar to themselves. So basically, those are the 3 forms of church governance and a bit of their definition and the way they operate. And of course, I'm coming from a church that follows the Presbyterian system of church governance, not to the letter, but there are some little omissions here and there because people try to do things that suit them at that particular time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. So looking at these 3 systems that we have, which one of these is much more preferable, and let's say that he has got some biblical traits?
Well, the whole issue is that we don't have a universal form of church governance, mm-hmm. because each governance is addressing a particular issue. This Presbyterian system was addressing an issue that was peculiar to them in the book of Acts. Mm-hmm. The question is, are we going to follow the Presbyterian system of church governance everywhere? Is it addressing our issues? Mm-hmm. If it's not addressing our issues, we might see perhaps a marriage of the episcopal or the congregational could be addressing the issues. What's more important is relevance, mm-hmm. because the person we have today and the person we have in the yesteryear is different in forms of acceptance, research, and being open-minded. Today we have more open-minded people that will ask questions, that will do research, and see the relevance of a particular issue. And when you see that your constitution and governance is no longer addressing issues that are pertinent to that particular group and to the nation as well, it's time to change and make sure that you focus and you come up with a particular form that is not against the Bible. It's not ultra vires the Bible, but it is biblical and spiritual and also agreed upon. I don't subscribe to the one-man band type of thing, because each person has got the downside and the upside, the weak side and the strong side. And so therefore it's necessary to interpolate our strengths so that we come up with a solid agreement on how we are going to handle these issues. So therefore it's not like a tablet, like a pill that you add nothing to. You just swallow it and it does the work. There is no contribution from you who's taking that pill. You just have to swallow it with much water and it does the work. So we don't have a pill type of church governance, but we have an involvement type of governance whereby we set key people in key positions and with a proper reporting structure that must be followed, that must be agreed upon. If we see it's no longer working, then there's time to change. Only the Bible does not change. The Bible has remained solid today and forever. But we as people in our situations and our conditions are changing, and therefore we've got to be adaptive to particular change. And if we resist change, we end up being archaic and irrelevant to the society that we are trying to address. So therefore, I cannot come with a particular church governance and say, this is the form, this is the way we should do, but observe the happenings, the attitude, the temperature, and the needs of the people. Because if governance is going to be proper, it must address relevant and pertinent issues.
Oh, I see. Well, I do get the impression that the application of these systems is contextual, and it depends with the situation that probably a given church is facing. So based on your experiences, let's say with different churches and even including your church, do you have typical examples where you can cite to say, in this situation, in this particular context, there was a pressing need for us to adopt an episcopal kind of system, and at another point we had to move to the Presbyterian, and at another point we had to adopt the Congregational? Do you have those typical examples?
Well, I could say not holistically so, but a marination of the Episcopal with the Congregational as well as Presbyterian. And these three speak to each other. And depending on the situation as it yields itself, you might see that here they need an authoritative voice that will speak. And that authoritative voice must have reached a position of authority that is accepted. You see, sometimes I begin to think about the book of Acts. Nobody appointed Peter to be the leader. But when he stood up, the other 11 stood with him and supported him. Nobody said, who put you in there? So the church is a spiritual matter. And we are talking of spiritual people that are mature. Remember, spirituality is not stupidity. It is not even illiteracy. But spirituality is something that is very enlightening, as well as with our educational support as well as achievement, we're able also to cement and concretize our spirituality. So hence, as I see, there are times when I see that, hey, here we need to use the authoritative episcopal system on that particular issue. And then there, I think the congregation must be involved. But however, best of all, it is the power of agreement that needs to be adhered to. And the leadership hierarchy will only give parameters and structures and guidance so that people don't go to ultra positions that can end up causing a lot of harm and detrimental to the church itself and to themselves as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that response. Well, let's move to the democracy and theocracy debate. Looking at it, I've been doing some readings on the field of democracy, and I've noticed that the United Nations has actually come up with a projection that over 157 countries across the globe have embraced democracy as their system of government. And many of these countries have declared themselves democratic republics, and they have adopted a constitution that speaks to issues of democracy, issues of fundamental freedoms and human rights. And it seems that many of the institutions within these given countries have also adopted the system of democracy as their way and system of running things. That is to say, including the church, including churches. Many of the churches, including in our country back home in Zimbabwe, have now adopted democracy and have now adopted constitutions that speak to democracy. So now, looking at it in that context, is democracy a good system for the church?
Well, I'll begin by saying that why we want to democratize the church, because it comes from the Greeks, the government for the people, by the people, and with the people, and so forth, which was quite good. And now what we are looking at is democracy. Whose democracy? And that democracy is addressing what issues and what problems. Yes, countries have become democratic, and some have even come to call themselves the democratic republics, but some have not seen the actual democracy. I've seen more of the autocracy in those countries with surname, democratic republic of so forth, sovereign state of so forth and so forth. I've seen more autocracy than democracy. But however, when it comes to church, the theocratic order is the benchmark. Now, when God created man, he created him for rulership, for dominion. When he said, be fruitful and multiply. Remember, God created everything, the birds of the air and all the animals and so forth, then planted a garden, and he looked for a manager. That manager was Adam, to dress it and to keep it. That means he is going to manage the affairs of God, under God. And he had the image of God, the Imago Dei, to do the mission of God, the Missio Dei. And he is a man with an image, the image of God. And when we say image, you're talking about the likeness of God, not the physical, because God is not physical. He is spirit. So the spirit part of man gives him image. And lack of a proper image can lead to different complexities. And when you try to scandalize somebody in order to feel better, it means that you have got a complex, you've got a poor self-image. Your image is in God, right? So Adam managed, imagine, God created animals with no names. And he brought them to the manager who would govern them. Why did Adam get the assignment of giving names to animals? The simple philosophy is that what you name, you can control. So when he named them, he was able to control them. And what you name, you are able to control and move on. So, but that control is not just peculiar to him alone, but he's doing it as a steward under God. And as we see the nation of Israel, we see the unveiling of the theocratic order. God himself was appointing judges, and they began to rule over the affairs of God, which was phenomenal thing, until when we come to the time of Saul, King Saul of the tribe of Benjamin, when the last judge, Samuel, was asked to go and anoint Saul. That's the confluence of change. When the nation wanted to be like other nations. They wanted to be fashionable. They were seeing what other nations were like, having a monarch. And we see the transition from theocracy to monarchy.
Yeah.
And right, so that's the confluence of change we see here. They wanted to be like other nations. And now if the church is going to be like that, to just transition in order to fit within what the United Nations have declared or what other nations are declaring, without really consulting the scriptures and the Bible and the Word of God and looking at the situation that is prevailing, we can miss it. We can have a fine form of governance which is difficult to follow. It becomes too academic, and as a result, people leave such straitjackets looking for something where they can have space to move and to function. So I'm not very much for the democratic adoption of methods for the church itself. But I'm saying that the church has got to be truly observant and don't just have some high-flying ideas with no landing gears. Be down on earth. We are there to manage under the image of God. Let's search the scriptures and see how God has managed his affairs, and let's also use the power of delegation. And what we have today is not quite theocratic, but it comes from the theocratic order. It's not quite democratic, but it has some marination of the democratic order. So therefore, the church is looking at the best form that will address its own issues and move on like that. But however, the purpose is for the establishment of the kingdom. And anything that will help to expedite the establishment of the kingdom, the extension of the kingdom, then it's good on a pragmatic basis.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So now looking at these two systems, to say democracy and theocracy, what is the fundamental difference between these two?
Well, the fundamental difference is that theocracy has God. It respects God. Democracy has people. It's more humanistic. It's respecting the wishes of the people. But if the wishes of the people are respected at the expense of the wish of God, then there is a problem. In the theocratic order, it is the wish of God. And whatever God wishes is good for the people, because he's the one who created the people. So therefore, theocracy above democracy.
Yeah, I can see. So now I now see where some of these problems that we see in these churches emerge. Sometimes we can have a popular opinion. We can have a popular decision that is taken and receives overwhelming votes, overwhelming approval by the public. But the question now comes to the fact that, does it have the approval of God?
Yeah, that's the big question, because the majority is not always right. If you look at the issue of the 12 spies sent by Moses in the book of Numbers, chapter 13, and among the 12, 10 came with a negative report and 2 came with a positive report. Now, if we say the majority is right, look at where the majority would lead you. And if the majority is making a decision that is against what God has said, then that majority must not be respected. And when the minority is making a decision that is following what God has said, like Joshua and Caleb, then let's follow that decision. So this is where I'm saying that let's always observe the scriptures, let's always observe the voice of God, and let's always observe what's best and what's suitable, not to feed our own egos or to make us more popular. And the other problem I've seen also in the church is that of popularity. Some people are elected into positions because they are more popular, not because they know what to do. They are more popular. And these popularity gains can also be detrimental to church governance, because you cannot govern the church on the basis of popularity. You've got to govern the church on the basis of knowledge and also vision, observing and applying truths that are necessary at that particular time.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Well, my last question for you. is that now, apart from the issue of the governmental system of the church, what are some of the other issues that are a cause of serious disputes and disgruntlement in the church?
Surely it's not the doctrine. The doctrine, we are mostly in agreement. We are in sync with the doctrinal tenets.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the first things that I've seen is position, power and position.
Mm-hmm.
I see Dr. Chikumbu has been in that position for too long, and I've been vying for that position.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Chikumbu will also try to change the constitution to elongate his tenure. Mm-hmm. This is what is happening in countries, mostly in African countries, that when a president is supposed to be in office for a particular period of time, when it's towards the end of the term, there are ways, manipulations that take place. And that in itself will send some disgruntlement. And people would like to. And then the other reason is that there are some people who would not bow down to the discipline of the church. Mm-hmm. They want to be themselves. They feel they're bigger than those that are above them. Mm-hmm. So they would rather win themselves and go and establish something that, and we are looking at, today we are looking at a church that is fond of titles, especially among the Pentecostal churches. We see apostles, evangelists, prophets, bishops, archbishops, and name it. Everybody is looking for a title that is bigger and heavier, but with no content. Mm-hmm. And we have lots of those. No, surely, especially among Pentecostal churches, in particular in Africa, we don't have shortages of bishops. We have shortages of functions. Mm-hmm. It reminds me the other time I was presiding over a pastoral forum. There were people from different denominations, and I asked people to introduce themselves, and I heard titles like senior pastor, archbishop, apostle, and founder, what have you, all these big titles. And when they went through those introductions, I said, wow, this is the most powerful room on earth. We should see God do something. Yeah. But after the whole workshop, there was really not much about God. There was just argumentation and people coming with the ideas and so forth. So that actually behooves me and behooves God that we have the heavy titles, but we don't see the function of God through those titles. I'm not against titles, but I'm more for the functions. If people are functioning and functional, I'm more on a practical basis. If I'm a pastor, am I functioning as a pastor?
Exactly.
If I'm a bishop, am I functioning as a bishop? I'm not given the title by people, but I think I acquire it because functionally, I've got a gifting that I am. For me, I'm not very interested in that. Some people have called me bishop, and I said, I'm not a bishop. Yeah, you are a bishop. Hey, someone called me prophet and so forth. Yes, I've functioned in a prophetic ministry. I've functioned in an evangelistic ministry. But for me, I see myself as a pastor and a teacher of the word. Yeah. And that much I know that I'm a teacher of the word. I've taught because the people I trained, especially during the time that I was, the 23 years I was principal at Living Waters Theological Seminary, I churned out quite thousands of people that are ministering in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Malawi, in the United States, in the UK, and in many other countries, both on the continent of Africa as well as outside the continent of Africa. We have come through my hands. Some were heading their own ministries. Some are even bigger than I ever been. And I know that it's scriptural because Jesus himself says, if you abide in me and my word abides in you, greater things than these you shall do. So when my students do greater things, that's fine. Jesus says you do greater things. He didn't say you'll be greater than him. You can do greater things than Jesus without being greater than Jesus. Never can you be. So therefore, as a teacher, you're always greater, but the student can do greater things. Yeah. And let me lastly say that the graft must be, the successor must go beyond the predecessor. Mm-hmm. You see, Moses went beyond Jethro, and Joshua went beyond Moses. Mm-hmm. In the field of philosophy, the three best-known philosophers among the Greeks are Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Mm-hmm. Socrates taught Plato Plato went beyond Socrates.
Yeah.
And Aristotle went beyond Plato.
Mm-hmm.
But still, we regard Socrates as one of the greatest philosophers.
Mm-hmm.
And regard Plato as one of the greatest philosophers. And we see Aristotle as the father of logic and moving on into dimensions unknown. And then if we look also at the scriptures, we see Paul went beyond Gamaliel, and Timothy did quite a lot.
Yeah.
So if your successor is going beyond the level that you have attained, then you know that is success. We must think generationally. We must not think that the world ends with us, with my rule, but there are others. So we lay down foundations for people that will succeed us so that the graph keeps on going higher and higher and the depth is achieved. So that's just a little bit of that I can share with you on that particular topic.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Murefu. Thank you very much for your informative insights. This is the platform where I get to sit with clerics, academics, economists, political scientists, lawyers, and all sorts of academics to have a discussion of their publications of other academic topics so as to conscientize the ordinary citizen. Thank you very much for your time and have a good day.
And just before you knock off,
okay.
One of the themes that I've operated on is called linking academic excellence with spiritual profundity.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And I left that pun at Living Waters Theological Seminary during my time. It's still being used. Mm-hmm. Why I came up with that is that I observed that most spiritual pastors are not academic. Mm-hmm. And most academic pastors are not spiritual. Hence the link. Mm-hmm. And we want to operate in the linking of academic excellence with spiritual profundity. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Oh, sure thing. Wonderful, wonderful. I like that. But now, how do you balance that? That's a very excellent thing. How do you balance the equation of being an academic and as well as being an ordained pastor? I know there are certain points where there can be conflicting areas of ideological concern. How do you balance the two?
Of course, within the academic, I'm doing a lot of research and seeing how things have operated, various theological thoughts that have taken place from the times of Tertullian through to my time. I see how they have operated. I do a lot of research, but I don't close myself in an ivory tower. I look at the people that I'm ministering to. That's why during my entire time as a principal and at Living Waters Theological Seminary, and also taught in other different institutions, including the University of Zimbabwe, I have not left the pastoral work, because as I pastor, I'm seeing the people at their point of need, and they need prayer. They don't need me to come and talk to them about cow bath. They don't need me to talk about Ignatius Loyola or Tertullian or about the various epochs of church history, the medieval church, and how the bishops and the Pope became the Pope and so forth. They don't need me. They need practical help. And they keep me spiritual as I minister to them, counsel them. They need their marriages put together and so forth, and they need to be built up. So therefore, this has helped me to maintain that balance between academics and spirituality.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Murefu. I want you to have a best day and enjoy your birthday.
Thank you so much, and the Lord bless you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye for now.